Are you tired of having a pitiful squat? Of course you are. There's nothing worse than a pitiful squat. In the 4 years that I have been training powerlifting, I have taken my squat from this to 600 pounds. And it has been a long journey, but I feel that I have gleaned some sacred knowledge, some tips and tricks, and some tidbits that will be able to help you take your terrible squat to something at least decent to mediocre, to maybe a world record. Who knows? Today, we are going to go through a squat training framework. This is not a one-to-one program. This is a framework of how to set up your squat training so that you can mix and match, make things work for your personal style, and train in a way that allows you to recover, because that is incredibly important. Without any further ado, let's get into Operation Squat a House. So who is this for? As I do with all of these framework style videos, we have to define our terms. This is a framework for people who are intermediate to advanced in the gym, specifically in the sport of powerlifting, but my strength enthusiasts can get a ton out of this as well. The reason I say this, intermediate to advanced, is because when you're a beginner, specifically your first year to 2 years in the gym, most everything works. I don't want you to get too in the weeds about specific rep ranges, training styles, timed rest, all these superfluous top of the pyramid style things that we talk about when we are trying to eke out the last 5, 10, 1% of gains. When you're starting out, most things work. So you can train reps of 10 on the squat, 3x10, 3x5. The whole 5-3-1 infrastructure has been made and designed for you, the newbie, the starter, the beginning powerlifter. Stick with that. Do many different things. Get an exposure to a ton of different things. Then when things start to peter off, you can look towards more intermediate to advanced programming. But there is no sense using all the tools in your toolbox before you really need to, right? When a hammer will just work, just use a hammer. So stick with what you're doing. So let's start with squat frequency. The squat is somewhere in the middle of the bench press and the deadlift in terms of general recovery. Most people can get away with 2 to 3 squat sessions a week. I say most. Some people will be absolutely toasted after one squat session. Maybe they are a very low bar squatter, their back, their hips are absolutely fried with one heavy session. That is totally fine. You can get more than enough work done with one squat session a week. But if you can tolerate 2, 3, even 4 touches on the squat, you will get more mechanical repetition. You'll understand the movement a little bit more. You'll be able to utilize secondary and tertiary movements. So the first thing that you need to do is find whether or not you can recover from 3 sessions. If not, I would usually just stick with 2. Honestly, I think most people that I'm talking to in this video can get away with 1 primary day, 1 secondary day. That's going to cover all of your bases. So when we were programming the primary squat, as I always say, that does not mean that this is the primary effort. You're going to give intense, great effort every time you come into the gym. So just because you see primary and secondary doesn't mean when you walk in and see, oh, it's a secondary day, time to just sandbag it. If you want to make progress, you have to approach every training day with the same type of intensity. You have to come in and want to get better. So just because it's a secondary day doesn't mean you get to just laze around, right? But on your primary day, we're going to do our primary squat. If you are a powerlifting competitor, you are going to squat the way that you will squat in a powerlifting competition. That means everything needs to be the same. Belt, knee sleeves, wraps, style of squatting, low bar versus high bar, everything is the same. And then you do the sets and reps that you have decided for that primary day. Normally on a primary day, that is going to be your total squat work, and then you'll move on to your other exercises. On your secondary squat day, you're going to be able to have a little bit more flexibility. You want to stay within the squat framework, but you can institute a high bar if you are a low bar squatter. You can do SSB, maybe even some hack squat, but if you have a tertiary day, that may be better on your 3rd day of training. Your secondary training day is to bring up movement deficiencies. It's to bring up weaknesses. It's to work on patterns that you have determined are weak within the squat. Maybe you're folding over too much and you want to engage a little bit more core. You throw in a movement that will help you with that. Maybe you're weak out of the hole or slow out of the hole. So you need some pause squats to enhance better positioning in the hole so that you can carry that over to the primary squat. Your secondary day is all about finding things that maybe are a little bit weaker in your squat or things that you want to practice and hammering them so that when you get back to your primary training, it will be hopefully ironed out a little bit and your squat in turn will continue to get stronger. If you are recovering well and you think you can handle another training day, your tertiary squat day, this is more so for quad and back and glute hypertrophy. I really love a high bar squat here, a high rep, high bar squat. I think something that is going to put the emphasis on your quads is going to be massive. So maybe you throw a hack squat in here. It doesn't have a ton of recovery cost, the same way that a barbell back squat does. You can throw the hack squat in there, still be in the squat pattern, but be able to isolate more of the quadriceps to build hypertrophy in the movement. We don't want to be completely overloading our volume and, just burning ourselves out in week 1 or 2, but we do want to stay within the squat framework to get a little bit more hypertrophy. So a hack squat, I think, is a perfect tertiary movement. Now that we've got the frequency down, let's talk about the style of programming that we are going to lean on our specific days, starting with the primary day. Because this is your comp specific squat, I think that you should have singles pretty much year round. There may be times when you can remove the singles, work on some triples or some doubles, but it is my estimation that in order to get better at singles, you need to practice singles. Now, this does not mean that you're going for 1 rep max attempts every single time that you step in the gym, but utilizing singles in the 85, 90, 95 intensity ranges can help you get ready for a competition and understand what it feels like to have that amount of weight on your back. Now, this is not going to be your primary driver here. We're going to do 1, maybe 2 singles on a given day, maybe ascending, so you start with an 80% and then you go 85%. You can use RPE on your singles. I have found that works very well for me, but you have to have a good grasp of RPE. You don't want to go in there and think that you're doing an RPE 8 and either do a 10 or a 6. You're losing gains on the table both ways there. So if you are, a little bit more in the intermediate side of things, staying with percentage of your 1 rep max can take all the guesswork out. We're going to do 1, maybe 2 singles, and then we're going to drop back and do 2 to 3 working sets, still maintaining a level of intensity that moves us towards getting stronger. So we're going to keep it probably between the 70% and the 85 to 90% intensity range, and we're going to stay between 3 to 6 reps. Now, these are, like I said, just frameworks. You have some flexibility in there, but for a primary squat day, I think that this is going to get you 99% of the way there. So before we talk about secondary programming, we've got to talk about some secondary squat options. My personal favorite, and one that I think should be the staple of your squat training, especially your secondary squat training, is the pause squat or the tempo squat. Utilizing some form of body control on this movement in your secondary day is going to absolutely enhance your strength almost instantly. After 4 weeks of utilizing pause squats, you will see a difference in your primary squat. I can almost guarantee it. Understanding what it takes to brace, to control, to explode out of the hole, all things that pause and tempo squats make you focus on, is going to carry over to your primary squat so incredibly well, and your primary squat is going to blow up. If you are not doing pause squats or tempo squats, you are missing out. These are the GOAT of secondary squat movements, and I honestly think that they should be in almost everybody's program. If you're struggling a little bit with depth, welcome to the club. I have always struggled with depth. I have found that box squats can be a really good way to get some practice with feeling what it feels like to actually hit competition depth. Now, these can be a bit difficult to set up, especially if you are in a gym that doesn't have a lot of different options in terms of box height. You may find a box that's not at depth, and then why are you doing these movements? You could implement a pin squat in that case, but pin squats are a little bit more difficult. They require a little bit more setup. So there's movement there. I have found that if you are struggling with depth, you can film your pause squats and make sure that you're going to depth. That's another way to kind of get around it. But if you're in a great gym that has different box heights, make sure you find one that is actually the hip crease below the knee so that you are actually at depth. Notice what it feels like to hit that position. Try and build some proprioception and understand where your body is in space, so then you can transfer that over to your primary squat and hopefully hit depth a little bit more consistently. Finally, something that I feel like is maybe falling out of favor with the modern squat and powerlifting training in general is bands, chains, any type of implement that changes the weight as you go through the implement. So when you're squatting with chains, as you get lower and they start to touch the ground, the weight is eased off of you a little bit. And then as you come out of the hole, it gets heavier because you are then taking the weight of the chains. Same thing with the bands. As you get lower, you're going to lose some of that band tension. And then as you come up, you are going to be able to feel a little bit more band tension. It's a good way to get an extra 30 to 40 pounds on the last, half to 1/3 of the movement. So if you're struggling with your lockout, Not often a thing that I see with squat, but if you are struggling with locking out, I think adding some bands or some chains could be a great tool for you. This is a little bit more niche, but I just wanted to mention it. So how are we going to program our secondary movements? One way that I find is really the best way to get the most bang for your buck is using ascending RPE sets. So let's say your secondary movement is a SSB squat. You're going to do one set of 6 at RPE 6, one set of 6 at RPE 7, one set of 6 at RPE 8. It's a good way to kind of build in your warm-ups so that when you get to the RPE 6, you're still kind of warming up and you can really be honest with yourself about the intensity and the difficulty of the weight that you have chosen. If you get to RPE 6 and you're like, man, I breezed through that, most likely it wasn't an RPE 6. So then you're gonna have to do a little bit of extra work to get to an RPE 7. I have found that that's a really good way if you're trying to learn more about RPE to, I guess, understand your RPE tolerance and what rate of perceived exertion actually means for you. There is also just sticking with percentages. If you don't want to worry about any type of subjectivity when we're talking about, squat and weight selection, if you want to stick to the pure math, I totally get that. Using percentages of your 1 rep max and understanding that because you are changing the implement, that it is not a 1-to-1 comp squat, your 1 rep max of your competition squat is not going to be accurate to your 1 rep max of your paused squat. So while you may be able to get away with 75% for 6 with a regular competition squat, if you are pausing, 75% may feel like a ton of bricks. So you're gonna have to titrate that down, maybe 60 to 65%, right? These are just general numbers, right? Use some common sense. Understand that when you're adding a new implement, it's not going to be 1-to-1 to your primary squat. We can do a range of 2 to 5 sets here. You can even bump up 6, 7. It really depends on your volume tolerance and what you can recover from. If your quads recover very well and you are in a quad focused block of training, you may want to throw 6 sets on there. 6 sets is 6 to 8 and just really burn your quads out. Train a little bit more like a bodybuilder. If you need just some extra touches, maybe you are implementing a secondary day for practice more so than hypertrophy, maybe keeping it to 2 to 3 sets so that you're not completely burnt out by the time you cycle back to your primary, that's another option. So there's different ways. It all depends on your volume tolerance, what you can recover from, because at the end of the day, you want to continue to recover so that by the time you swing back around to the primary squat, you're not so overly excess fatigue that you're not getting great work done on your primary. There's going to be a little bit of carryover fatigue, obviously. The body is going to get cumulatively more fatigue throughout a block, but you want to try and get as close as possible to perfect on these, weight selection and volume tolerance. If you have chosen to go the tertiary squat route and you want another day of training, I think the hack squat, like I talked about, or the leg press even, is a fantastic option. This would be an incredible way to get a little bit more quad stimulus without all of the carryover like I talked about earlier. We can also go with a high bar or an SSB, maybe even throwing tempos onto that to get a little bit more quad work there. I find that you're gonna get a little bit more lower back fatigue carryover with that, but to each their own. If your lower back can handle it, go for it. If you are in a gym with a belt squat, please utilize this implement. It is one of the best squatting implements that you can do. It is very similar to your barbell squat pattern without any of the upper body problems. So maybe you've got shoulder issues getting into the low bar position, jump over to the belt squat. You will get a very similar stimulus in your lower body without any of the hassle of the upper body stuff. I think use a belt squat if you have one. And finally, I think a good morning, if you are losing a little bit of core and lower back stability, a good morning with an SSB bar specifically can be a fantastic way to train that. You're also going to get some carryover with your Romanian deadlifts, which hopefully you're using in your deadlift training. For tertiary sets, we're going to go very basic. We're going to go very much like a bodybuilder, static RPE across the board, higher reps here because the goal is more hypertrophy, and I have found going into a higher rep range is going to be a little bit more effective, especially after you've done more higher intensity, lower rep work in your primary and secondary day. So you may want to go even lighter with a little bit higher rep range. I love to stay between 15 and 20, but that may be a little bit heavy, especially on a hack squat. If you don't have the greatest wind, you might be huffing and puffing and not be able to get the most out of it. So again, it's all about what you can tolerate, but I think pushing into the higher rep range is going to be a little bit better for you here. Some supplemental movements that may not fit into your squat training days, but I think you should be doing. I already touched on the Romanian deadlift. I think if you are a power lifter and you're also trying to build your deadlift, if you're not Romanian deadlifting, even if you are a sumo puller, you're losing out. It's a fantastic movement. And then focusing a little bit more on single leg movements, maybe in an off-season context, the Bulgarian split squat, the lunge. This can help Identify weaknesses between legs, which can be really beneficial as you bring back primary squat training. Maybe you're post meet and you want to kind of do a detox. You want to kind of understand maybe what went wrong with your squat, utilizing some single leg movements and understanding, hey, my right leg really is a lot weaker than my left leg, speaking from personal experience. Maybe then you can add in more single leg work to get a little bit better and hopefully bring those two more online so that when you get back to your primary squat, those things are ironed out a little bit more. Bringing it all together, an example microcycle here. I like to start off with my primary squat. I think getting that out of the way for me personally really works. So I like to do like a secondary or tertiary bench and then squat after. I like to squat first in the day and then go to bench. I usually like to train in the way that a competition is going to go. So even if it's my primary bench press, I like to get a squat done first and then get to bench, especially if I'm in a meet prep context, so that I can kind of feel what the carryover fatigue, maybe intra-day, is going to feel like going from squat to bench to deadlift. This is just a personal quirk of mine, but something I thought I would mention. So day one, squat, and then probably a secondary bench. Day two, we're gonna do our primary deadlift and another bench press. I like to bench 4 times a week, so that's what I'm going off of here. If you have opted into a tertiary squat, if you're doing 3 squat days, you may want to throw your squat on this. You can probably combine your deadlift training and your squat training a little bit since they're similarly lower body, but you don't want to do too much to burn yourself out. So remembering that balance at all times. Day 3, we're going to bench again. This is probably going to be our primary bench press and our secondary deadlift. And then day 4, we're going to do just our secondary squat so that we can focus a little bit more on our weaknesses. The most important thing about all of these framework videos that I put out is to make it your own. As I've talked about throughout this entire video, this is just an example. You have to plug and play. I've given you more than enough options to find your perfect squat training. Hopefully this is a baseline. This is a framework that you can then iterate on and make your own, or you can hire a coach. I am a powerlifting coach. There are many powerlifting coaches out there that will help streamline the process. It's not necessary, but it will get you stronger faster. I truly believe that. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to get your bench press stronger, you can click on this one right here. I will see you in the next one. Get strong and stay strong.